Some things happen in the blink of an eye, but the echo of it can shake an entire city. A quiet courtroom early in the morning, seats not yet full, the air still cold. A black woman stands still, robe not yet on. No one knows who she is. No one pays her any mind, and that was their first mistake. Two white officers enter, one of them familiar. Officer Travis Boone, chin raised, chest puffed like he owns the whole damn room. He gestures, curt, commanding.
Move.
When the woman didn't respond, he stepped closer.
Who do you think you are?
The question barely left his lips when his hand came swinging. A sharp slap cracked through the courtroom. No one said a word, just wide eyes. A coffee cup slipped from someone's hand. 1 second, then two. The air turned solid. The woman stood still. Her face tilted to one side. A red mark bloomed across her cheek. But she didn't flinch. She didn't strike back either. She just slowly turned her head. Her eyes met his. Not with fear, not even surprise, but with recognition. Like she had finally come face to face with something everyone knows, but no one ever dares to name.
Do you even know who I am?
He asked again, this time his voice lower. But now, he was the one who didn't know. She didn't answer. She just stepped forward. One step, then another, climbed up to the bench, and took the highest seat in the room. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loud. Then she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it rang like a bell in the hearts of everyone who had ever been wronged, but never once dared to speak back.
You just hit a sitting judge right here in open court.
And from that moment on, everything started to unravel. It wasn't just a slap. It was an explosion that exposed a system that had stayed silent for far too long. A slap not aimed at one person, but at the idea that black women should always stay quiet, that we don't have the right to be angry. But this time, the woman they thought was just another nobody was the only one in that room with the power to pass judgment. And in just a few minutes, everything they buried for years would start peeling back layer by layer. Because next, Clara wasn't just going to deal with one officer. She was about to blow the whole damn network wide open. The courtroom still wasn't full, but now every eye was locked on one place. The high-backed chair at the center where Clara May sat, rooted like she had grown straight from the marble floor, unshaken, unmoved. The imprint of a hand still marked her cheek, but her eyes, sharp, bright, like blades catching light. Boone stood frozen stiff, like a child caught red-handed. No more swagger, no more bark, just confusion creeping up his neck, like a rope tightening inch by inch.
Sergeant Boone.
Clara said his name, like a teacher calling on a student in the middle of class. No raised voice, no hint of rage, but the whole room fell silent, like someone had just pulled the oxygen from the air.
Did you just strike a sitting judge?
It was a question, but it sounded like an indictment. Boone swallowed hard. His voice came out rougher than usual, like he was trying to hold onto a power that had already slipped through his fingers.
I didn't know who you were.
Clara looked him dead in the eye, didn't blink.
That's not what I asked. Did you hit me or not?
Boone froze, then nodded, reluctantly, like he'd just swallowed a chunk of ice whole.
Yes, but I thought you were just a regular person.
Just a regular person.
Clara repeated it, not to confirm, but to let everyone in the room feel exactly how Boone had just reduced the existence of a black woman.
I wonder, if I were a white man in a suit, salt and pepper hair, wearing a badge, would you have raised your hand then?
Boone didn't answer, but his silence was the loudest answer of all. The silence of a man who knew he was wrong, but had never been held to account. A young attorney in the back row pulled out her phone. The camera started rolling. No one stopped her. No one dared. Clara rose to her feet, not to intimidate, but to make it clear. She was the one who owned this room.
You think just because I wasn't wearing my robe, I didn't have the right to sit here? Or was it because I'm a black woman, and you assumed I didn't belong in this seat at all? For the past 20 years, I've seen men like you using fists instead of facts, using power to silence the powerless, and hiding behind a system that covers every bloodstain on your hands with silence.
She raised her hand, tapped the bench 3 times. A simple sound, but it echoed like history itself knocking at the door.
You didn't just strike me. You struck an entire community. You struck every woman who's ever been ignored in this courtroom.
Her voice began to slow, but it didn't weaken. It sank deeper, like each word was being carved into stone.
And today, you will be held accountable.
Boone looked around. No more handshakes, no more allies. Even the officer by the door, his longtime partner, avoided his gaze. Clara turned to the court clerk.
Please enter into the record. Sergeant Travis Boone has admitted to assaulting Judge Clara May right here in this courtroom. An act not born of confusion, but of prejudice and misplaced power.
As her words ended, it felt like the entire room came crashing back to earth. This was no longer a case of mistaken identity. It was a mirror, a reflection of hundreds of buried incidents, hidden for years beneath silence and shame. The only difference this time, the one who was struck had a microphone and the power to be heard. Clara sat down, her judge's robe still draped over the chair, but she didn't need it. She didn't need to raise her voice, because now the whole room had no choice but to listen and to see. Down below, the boy who'd been arrested, falsely accused by Boone, sat quietly beside his lawyer. His eyes were wide, not with fear anymore, but with something else. Wonder. For the first time in his life, he saw a woman who looked like his grandma, stand tall and not bow her head. Something shifted in his gaze, not submission, but admiration. Clara turned to the court clerk.
Please arrange for a formal investigation. This is no longer an internal matter. This is a criminal case. Please arrange for a formal investigation. This is no longer an internal matter. This is a criminal case.
Clara didn't sleep that night. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She wrote. Page 1, April 11th. I was assaulted in open court, in front of witnesses and cameras. Page 2. This is the first time it was recorded, but not the first time it happened. Carter, her most trusted aide, walked in, a thick stack of case files in hand.
What do you need me to do?
I want to see every single case Boone's had his hands on in the last 10 years.
That's going to be a whole damn storm.
Then let's start with the first wind.
The files started pouring in. Boone's name was everywhere, like footprints in fresh snow. 19 complaints, 12 cases of excessive force, 5 missing body camera videos, 2 injured teens never investigated, and one name kept appearing next to him, Ada Carson Ramsey, the prosecutor who handled most of those cases. Clara didn't have to ask. She just looked, and she understood. Boone wasn't an exception. He was the result, a product of something larger, a system, a chain, where every link knew that silence would be rewarded and speaking up would be punished. The next morning, 2 internal affairs officers walked into Clara's office. Agent Rosalind Keene, a black woman with a face like carved marble, and Felix Reyes. sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, but the kind of person who remembers everything.
We've been watching Boone for a while, but we never had enough to get all the way in. Not until that slap.
Then let's go all the way to the root.
Reyes handed her a USB drive.
This file will send chills down your spine.
She turned it on. An audio recording from 2 years ago, inside the police department locker room. Boone's voice laughing smugly.
Judge Clara? Walks around like she owns the damn place.
What if she comes for you?
Let her try. I've got people higher up. Once I file a complaint, she's gone. Just like that. Snap of a finger.
Clara didn't flinch. She simply made a note. They didn't just disrespect me. They believed I'd stay silent. Keene placed another document on the table.
They did the same thing to a journalist, Julia Spence. She disappeared. And the one who handled that case?
Clara glanced down. Captain Whitaker. Boone had once served under him. The deeper they dug, the darker it got. A network of protection, a system of cover-ups. Boone was just the arrow, but the ones pulling the string, they were sitting in boardrooms wearing suits, sipping morning coffee. Clara stood up.
You can't clean the house when the roots are still in place. We're not here to take down one man. We're here to take down the entire network.
That night, she received her first text. No name, just 5 words. Know when to stop, Clara. Carter read it. Her face hardened.
Oh, you want me to handle it?
No, we'll follow procedure, but this time the procedure will be in the light.
The next morning, she gave 3 orders. Reopen every case Boone ever signed off on. Call back every former witness. Invite the press into the briefing room. They thought she was just a victim. She showed them. She was the witness and the one resetting the scales of justice.
We just uncovered a $15,000 transfer from the Charleston PD Fund to an outside organization. That organization covered Boone's legal fees last year.
And who authorized that payment?
Keene pointed to a single name, Carson Ramsey. Everything began to sharpen. As they peeled back each layer, the smell wasn't just of a bad apple. It was a whole corpse in the room, masked with cheap perfume. Clara wrote in the file, "The system isn't rotten. It was built to keep men like Boone in place. We're not just fixing. We're peeling the skin off a sleeping beast." That afternoon, as Clara stepped out of the courthouse, an elderly woman stood waiting, maybe in her 70s, long coat, hands trembling just a little. She reached for Clara's hand, held it gently, and whispered,
"They used to say I'd never see justice. Thank you for letting me see a piece of it before I close my eyes for good."
Clara squeezed her hand, slow, lingering, silent, and just enough for that aging heart to know it hadn't been forgotten. The storm hadn't come yet, but the clouds were gathering. And Clara, she didn't run from storms. She summoned them. Because what came next was unthinkable. The man who once believed he was untouchable was about to cross a line, and Clara would face a choice: fight to the end or protect the one she loves first. It started with a message, no name, no greeting, just 5 words. "Nice house in Mount Pleasant." Sent to Clara's personal phone at 6:04 a.m. She was making tea. Her hands paused mid-motion. No panic, no tremble, but her eyes went still, as if someone had dropped ice into her chest. 30 minutes later, a package arrived at the courthouse. No return address. Inside, a photo. Her grandson walking home from school. Backpack slung over his shoulder, sweat in his shirt, a carefree smile that didn't know someone was watching. On the back, in all caps, "Stay in your lane." Clara didn't cry. She'd seen threats like this before, but never against her family, and never this clear. Carter walked into her office, setting a stack of files on her desk. Just as she handed him the photo, he read it in silence, and for the first time, the tall, steady man choked on his breath.
It's time to protect both justice and what I love.
They have touched your family now.
She ordered her grandson pulled from school temporarily, requested security detail for her sister, no press, no headlines, because real threats, they don't shout, they whisper, and they come in silence. That afternoon, Carter handed her another file, internal affairs data. Boone was no longer in custody. He had been relocated, no official order, no documentation. Just one lead, a black SUV leaving the precinct at 3 a.m. Clara understood immediately. Boone wasn't gone. He was being repositioned to strike back, to intimidate, or worse. That evening, Carter got a call from an unknown number, a man's voice, calm, flat, like reading the news. "Tell her to stop. No one wants to see the whole building burn." Then click. Clara sat alone in her office. The lights dimmed. She looked up at a large map of Charleston on the wall, red pins scattered across it, each one marking a case she had handled. Every dot was a person, a story, a voice once pushed to the margins. Now, she was the one being pushed, targeted, but she wasn't backing down. Keene from Internal Affairs returned. She carried new information.
We've confirmed it. There's a powerful group working together to smear you. They've started reaching out to the press, spreading false stories, digging up old photos. There's an article in the works, accusing you of bias in cases involving police officers.
All right then, they've got fake news. I've got the truth. They've got money. I've got my community. They've got guns, but I've got the light.
Reyes cut in, his voice lower than usual.
"Clara, you need to protect yourself. You could step back, still keep your name, still be respected."
Clara stood, walked to the window. Outside, the rain had started. But rain in Charleston can't put out the fire burning in someone who's been scorched by silence their whole life. She spoke slowly.
I didn't come this far just to bow my head when the flames rise. I came to be the spark, if that's what it takes.
The next day, she held a press conference, not to defend herself, but to expose the truth.
I'm not a victim. I'm a witness, and I'm a survivor. Don't send me threats and expect me to back down. Send as many as you want, but remember this. I've survived a whole generation of being beaten, silenced, and forgotten.
Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It rang out like an old church bell, calling back, reminding, and awakening. That night, the media ran headline after headline, an internal war, one black judge versus the system. Accompanied by photos, Clara standing tall, eyes steady, surrounded by microphones and flashing cameras. Carter stepped into her office, laid a printed article on the desk. Headline: "The woman the system tried to erase, but couldn't." Clara smiled softly, not out of pride, but because she knew this time they were forced to look. Below the article, hundreds of comments poured in. "She reminds me of my mother. She makes me think of my grandma, who was beaten, and no one believed her. Thank you for not staying silent. We see you. We stand with you." Clara printed them all, cut out each comment, filed them into a folder. On the cover, she wrote, "Why fear is not an option." The next morning, a delivery arrived. No name, no note. Inside, a toy gun, painted black, and one live bullet taped to a folded slip of paper. One wrong move. Clara handed the note to Carter, then looked him straight in the eye.
Then let me walk every step right and let them slip on the darkness they created themselves.
The day Boone was arrested, there were no cheers, no applause, no banners, just a quiet afternoon at the courthouse, and a man who once believed he was untouchable escorted away with hands that no longer held power. Clara got the message at 3:14 p.m., a text from Internal Affairs. Boone under federal custody, no resistance. She set the phone down, didn't smile, didn't sigh. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up at the right time." But this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. In her office, Clara laid out the files in front of her. Boone's name was now just a bullet point, but the list of what still needed to be addressed, longer than the roads she once walked as a young attorney. ADA Carson Ramsey resigned quietly. 3 more officers, stripped of their badges, 1 senior judge, benched pending investigation, and dozens of cases now ordered for review. Carter walked in holding a cup of hot tea in his hand.
They're calling it the Charleston Reckoning in the news.
It's not a reckoning. It's shining a light on what's been rotting for years.
She stood, looked out the window. People were gathering outside. No chants, no shouting, just standing, still, like a ritual, a silent offering for the woman who dared to stand in the storm. That afternoon, Clara submitted an official request to hold a public hearing with press, with community, and with the truth seated in full view. At the courthouse, she didn't take the high bench. She sat in the front row, just like everyone else. No robe, no badge, just a 62-year-old black woman carrying the memory of a generation taught to stay quiet. When her name was called, the room held its breath. "Judge Clara May, please come forward to testify." She stood, walked slowly, steadily, each step laying down stone for those who would walk this path after her. The prosecutor asked,
At the moment of the assault, what did you feel?
I felt familiar. Not because I'd been hit before, but because I'd seen people like me, hit, pushed aside, buried in silence. This time, that silence had my name in it, and I chose not to hold it anymore.
The room held its silence. The court stenographer's hands trembled slightly. A reporter wiped away a tear. Then, Boone's defense attorney stood, his voice unsteady.
Do you think you're above the law, ma'am?
Clara smiled, not bitterly, just gently, like a grandmother teaching a hard truth to a child.
I believe I'm beneath the law, the way every citizen ought to be. But that day, the law was under the feet of someone like Boone. And all I did was pull it back to where it belongs.
As she stepped down from the stand, someone clapped. Not loud, but it echoed, like the exhale of a generation who had been forced to swallow their truth for far too long. That very night, the state governor announced the formation of a task force to re-examine 140 cases tied to the names Clara had provided. A civilian oversight committee was established, and Charleston, a city once lulled to sleep beneath its polished, historic charm, was now wide awake. But Clara didn't hold justice like a trophy. She didn't preach. She didn't capitalize on the attention. Quietly, she submitted her letter of resignation from the bench. When Carter saw it, he froze.
What are you doing?
Lighting the torch is one thing, but letting others carry it farther, that's where real change lives.
You could lead this, Clara.
No, I'm the one who opened the door. The one who leads should be the next generation, not carrying the wounds, but carrying the strength.
The next morning, she stepped onto the bench one last time. She didn't read a verdict. She spoke only one sentence.
I stepped down from this seat, not because I've lost faith in the law, but because I believe there are young voices who will shape it better, fairer, and see us more clearly.
The interpreter wiped her eyes. An elderly woman in the back row nodded slowly. No words, just a look that said, "Seeing Clara?" felt like being seen. Not long after, Clara's grandson drew a picture in class. A woman standing in front of a courthouse. Behind her, a crowd of black people holding signs that read, "She made them listen." Clara pinned that drawing on her living room wall. Just below it, the words she once wrote to herself. "I didn't come to live in a badge. I came to break the wall that kept them from seeing us." And she did, not just for herself, but for everyone who was ever told they weren't worth hearing. This is the story of women who held families together, who watched their children be wrongly accused, who were pushed aside and told, "This isn't your place." But today, they saw someone who looked like them stand at the center and bring the whole system to a halt. This is the story of women who were pushed to the margins, who held their families together, who watched their children be wrongly accused, who were told, "This isn't your place." But today, they saw someone who looked like them rise up and make the entire system stop and listen. It's a story of resilience, of wisdom shaped through hardship, and of a love for truth even when it hurts. It's a gift to the next generation, so that our grandchildren won't just hear about the pain, but get to live in justice, because someone like Clara dared to stand up. If you've ever felt forgotten, if you've ever believed your voice was invisible, then this story is here to say, you are seen, you are heard, and you are never alone. If this story touched you, please share it, because somewhere out there, someone is still looking for a reason to believe in justice, in truth, and in themselves.